My brothers and sisters, whenever we see the shaking of nations, we must lift our eyes above the headlines and discern the hand of God. Because the news is never just about politics, strategies, or military action. It is about kingdoms clashing, light and darkness colliding, and prophecy unfolding before our very eyes. When we talk about the sovereignty of God over the nations, we are entering into a truth that is both humbling and empowering. The reality is that no matter how advanced human technology becomes, no matter how strategic leaders are in their planning, no matter how powerful militaries grow, there is a higher throne above every throne and a greater authority above every ruler. What is happening in Israel, Gaza, Qatar, or anywhere else on the globe is not simply about men making decisions. It is about God orchestrating history according to his divine will. Scripture says in Daniel 20:21 that it is God who changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. That means leadership transitions, wars, peace treaties, and even unexpected survivals or escapes are not random occurrences. They are all folded into the providence of God. When nations rage and leaders clash, it looks chaotic to human eyes, but in heaven there is order. The sovereignty of God ensures that nothing escapes his control. It may seem like Israel is targeting Hamas, or Hamas is striking back, or other nations are aligning themselves strategically. But behind all of it is the hand of God, ensuring that his purposes are not derailed. He sits above the circle of the earth, and Isaiah 40 reminds us that the nations are like a drop in the bucket before him. That means no government, no alliance, no terrorist organization, and no intelligence service has the final word. Only God does. This is why believers should never be consumed with despair when reading the news. God is not pacing the floor of heaven. He is not wringing his hands wondering what will happen next. He already knows the end from the beginning, and he is bringing the world to the point of his ultimate plan. The sovereignty of God also means that every headline has a deeper meaning. When we read that Israel targeted Hamas leadership in Doha, and yet no one was killed, some will call that human error. Others will call it protection. Others will call it propaganda. But those who have spiritual discernment know that such moments remind us that survival, even in the middle of danger, is permitted or withheld by the hand of God. In Acts 17:26, Paul declares that God determines the appointed times and the boundaries of nations. That means that no one dies before their time, no one reigns beyond their limit, and no group continues unless God allows it. The sovereignty of God keeps history on his clock. What men may intend for destruction can be restrained if God says, not yet. This reality should anchor our faith because it shows that God is not a passive observer of human affairs. He is the active ruler. When kingdoms rise against kingdoms, God is still the king. When leaders seek to dominate the world stage, God still decides whether they stay or go. When war drums beat louder, God still holds back the tide until his appointed season. His sovereignty assures us that while the world is unstable, heaven is not. While human leaders change their policies, God does not change his promises. And while empires have risen and fallen throughout history, his kingdom is the only one that will last forever. Understanding God's sovereignty should also shift how we respond to the news. Instead of being shaken by reports of war, rumors, or escalating conflicts, we should be strengthened by the reminder that God is on the throne. Instead of living in fear, we should live in faith. Instead of believing that men hold all the power, we should rest in the fact that God holds all the power and delegates it only as he chooses. He raises up and he brings down. He opens doors and he closes them. He allows nations to shake so that people will look to the one kingdom that cannot be shaken. The sovereignty of God is not just a theological truth. It is a practical anchor for daily life. It reminds us that while the world may look out of control, it is never out of God's control. And when you grasp that, you can face every headline with courage, confidence, and hope, knowing that God's hand is still writing the story of history. When we look at the survival of leaders, organizations, or even nations in the face of attack, we must not fall into the trap of calling it coincidence or luck. Nothing in this world happens by chance, because everything is under the sovereign direction of God. The truth is that survival itself is never random. It is divine timing. When Israel strikes and the report comes back that Hamas leaders are still alive, many analysts will try to explain it with human logic. Poor targeting, advanced protection, intelligence failures, or even misinformation. But what the world overlooks is that life and death are ultimately in God's hands. Scripture says in Hebrews 9:27 that it is appointed unto man once to die, and after that comes judgment. That word, appointed, means fixed. It means there is a divine calendar in heaven where every man's days are already known. You cannot die before your time, and you cannot live past your appointed moment. That is not superstition. It is the sovereignty of God over life itself. Think about it. Pharaoh tried to destroy the children of Israel, but Moses was spared. Herod tried to kill the baby boys in Bethlehem, but Jesus was preserved. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, but his life was kept. Peter was imprisoned and scheduled for execution, but God sent an angel to release him. In every case, survival was not because men were lucky or because their enemies were weak. It was because God said, "Not yet." That's the same truth playing out in our day. Whether it is Hamas leaders escaping destruction, a government official walking away from an assassination attempt, or even you surviving an accident you thought would take your life, survival is never random. It is God reminding us that his timing controls every breath we take. This should change the way we view both tragedy and deliverance. When someone falls in battle, it is not because God was absent. It was their appointed time. And when someone walks away unharmed, it is not because of chance. It is because God has more for them to face. before their appointed time comes. We often only see survival through the lens of human effort. Bodyguards, security systems, bunkers, military defense. But behind all of it is the unseen hand of God. Psalm 31:15 says, "My times are in your hands." That verse is not only personal, it is global. The times of kings, rulers, organizations, and nations are also in his hands. When Israel launches a missile and no one dies, the story isn't just about failed targeting. It is about God saying, their time has not yet come. When a world leader survives an attack, it may look like human brilliance, but it is ultimately God preserving them until his purpose is fulfilled. This is why pride is so dangerous for nations and leaders. They think survival is their own doing. But the reality is that every breath is borrowed from the Lord. The very men who boast in their strength are breathing air they did not create and living days they did not design. For believers, this truth is not only sobering but also comforting. It means that your life is not vulnerable to the random chaos of this world. You cannot leave this earth 1 second before God allows it. If you are still alive today, it is because God still has purpose for you. That car accident that didn't kill you, that sickness that didn't take you, that danger that passed you by, all of it is a testimony that survival is not luck. It is divine timing. Just as God controls the destiny of nations, he also controls the days of your life. So, when we look at these world events, don't just see the headlines. See the hand of God at work. See that life and death are not controlled by missiles, politicians, or military forces, but by the God who gives breath and takes it away. See that survival is never meaningless. It is a sign that God is delaying the end until his appointed purposes are complete. That truth should move us to trust him more deeply, to stop living in fear of what might happen, and to rest in the assurance that nothing can touch us until God says our time has come. Every time conflict erupts in the Middle East, it is not just another headline. It is a prophetic echo reverberating through history, a reminder that we are moving closer to the climax of God's plan. Wars and rumors of wars in that region are not ordinary news cycles. They are signals that the biblical narrative is still unfolding right before our eyes. Jesus himself said in Matthew 24 that in the last days there will be wars and rumors of wars, nations rising against nations, and kingdoms against kingdoms. He told us not to be surprised when these things happen, because they are birth pains pointing toward the ultimate return of the King. When we see Israel under attack or striking its enemies, when we hear of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, or other players entering the scene, we must not treat it as disconnected political tension. These are prophetic signs that God is aligning the nations for his purpose. The Middle East has always been the stage of God's activity in human history. It is where Abraham was called, where David reigned, where prophets declared the word of the Lord, where Jesus was born, crucified, and resurrected, and where the church was birthed. It is no accident that this small strip of land called Israel is still the center of global headlines thousands of years later. The world's empires rise and fall, but God keeps drawing the eyes of the nations back to Israel because it is central to his prophetic plan. When conflict intensifies there, heaven is sounding an alarm that the timetable is moving forward. This is why spiritual discernment is so important. The natural mind looks at the situation and only sees political maneuvering, military strategy, or economic interests. But the spiritual mind sees beyond it and recognizes that God is shaking the nations. When Israel strikes at Hamas leadership and the news says no one was killed, we must ask ourselves, what is God saying through this? Perhaps it is a warning